And one interesting thing about her is that she's written a book, and the pre-release came out yesterday. And rather than telling you how you did that, just grab a minute afterwards.
Not physically. Or, I mean. Yep. You should wait to clap until after I'm done speaking. But thank you. So, like you said, my name's Amanda Berlin. I'm an information security architect at Harkin Labs. This talk is based around kind of what the book is about. It is defensive security best practices for enterprise environments, anywhere from a small environment to a larger environment, all normal stuff that you should do once you either start a security program or sometimes you're just thrown into the lion's den and expected to run a security department, and this is kind of where to start. So that's me. That's my nice little thing that was made for me off my head. What we do at Harkin Labs is a lot of Splunk integration and implementation and SOC managed services. My role specifically is working around implementations of Splunk and giving our customers the best implementation that they can have for their individual environment. I've done a lot of defensive security throughout my 12-ish years in IT. I started as just a lowly help desk person, worked up, did a lot of network security, a lot of Windows server, you name it. We were a jack of all trades at several of the places that I worked, running around putting out fires all the time in really shitty environments, and this is where a lot of that experience came from. And that's the book. So, Defensive Security Handbook, published through O'Reilly. If you ever decide to write a book, I highly recommend going through them. They're amazing to work with. I have a couple friends that have written books through other publishers that are, I guess, a nightmare, but they're really interested in finding new people in the information security space because it's relatively new for them. So if you're interested in like blogging or writing or doing screencasts or whatever, they're looking for people too. And it is right now the intro and the chapter 1 and chapter 2 is on Safari Books Online. It's still in progress. If you get it now, or if you look at it now, there's a link to some feedback. So if you have feedback on the first couple chapters, you can go do that. Try and be constructive and not a jerk. But it's a lot of work writing a book. People told me it was a lot of work, but I didn't realize until you start doing it how much work it is. But there it is. It should be out in March. Physically in March. So, that being said, to kind of start this out, you want to go into your security department program with the idea that all the low-hanging fruit that's out there is what's going to be attacked first. There's script kiddies out on the internet, there's bots, whatever, that's automatically going to look for VNC open to the internet on a server or Windows XP sitting on the internet, that kind of stuff. So you want to be able to look at that stuff first. So this is a quote that I wouldn't make you read, but I'll go ahead and read it to you. Many attacks on internet and network systems have no particular target. The attacker simply sends a large broadcast that uses any unprotected system as a staging point from which to launch an attack, like bots. Using computers without basic protections like firewalls, antivirus, and user education not only affects your own business, but many other businesses as the virus is spread around the internet. Your system's lack of protection makes you a target. It can destroy your computer or your network and can contribute to a virus distribution that slows or halts portions of the internet. You don't want to contribute to the overall shittiness of the internet. That's not in the quote. All of, all of us who use the internet have a responsibility to help create a culture of security that will enhance consumer and business confidence. But most importantly, failing to heed best practice advice could hurt your company significantly. And that's from the Internet Security Alliance side. Step 1, you want to work with your stakeholders, whether you have a security department or not. They should know where you sit, what your plan is. You should work with them to create a plan. It doesn't matter what size organization you have, if you have a bunch of red tape to go through or not. Having C-level executives or whoever the stakeholder for the data is, they are going to be the people that you're going to need to work with, and let them know what is at stake. A lot of research that we'll go through is stuff that's free. You have to let them know that up front. You can do your due diligence for free without asking them for any money up front. A lot of times when you come to them and say, oh my God, we have a lot of security problems, we know this, we will show you the research and we can do it all for free, at least in the beginning. So being able to set a path of where you want to go from free and easy to free and not really easy, and then finally them giving you some kind of budget if you don't have one already. A lot of people have budgets already and aren't doing best practice. So they will have, you know, the huge blinky boxes that they're not doing anything with, but they're installed and they have a check mark from whoever compliance you're going through. It doesn't really mean it's secure because you haven't covered all your bases yet. Creating plans, milestones, and use cases. So a use case should be based around what your biggest risk is. So if you are a healthcare organization, it's going to be patient safety, and then you kind of flow from there and see what could compromise your patient safety, and what controls, what monitoring can you build around that you don't have in place already, and then go from there. You have to, you know, build a couple risks out, build use cases around those risks, and use that as your starting point in your guide of where you want to go down the road. Create, you know, 3, 5, 10-year plans. I know technology changes a whole lot, but from your business model, your risks are gonna change too, but not as much as the technology will around it. So, for asset management, this is a recurring theme throughout all of everything defense is asset management. There's so many people that have absolutely no idea what's on their network. You know, you run a scan here, you run a scan there, you're looking in DNS, your IP address management, you're looking at security scans, you did an Nmap, you do whatever, and still like 3 weeks down the line, oh my God, there's another Windows XP box. There's actually an asset management framework out there that this came from. I'm not going to go too much into asset management, but that's one of the most important things, because you're not going to be able to secure what you don't know you have. Having one source of truth. A lot of people have like, oh, we kind of have a spreadsheet, or we have a SharePoint doc, or we have things in DNS, but it's not all correct. I mean, you're never going to get 100% unless you have 10 devices on your network. But being able to get as close as you can and seeing the high vulnerabilities in your network is going to take some asset management. Being able to automate it. Having to do that manually through spreadsheets. I've done that before. It's not very fun. And don't forget the cloud. Just because, you know, you have your website out on the cloud somewhere doesn't mean that you should not secure it, because it's not always going to be your cloud provider's job. Something else free and easy that you can start with. This is driving me insane.
Hello, I'm Geek here. Unfortunately, the Evan Media froze up, so we have no audio until about the 12-minute, 12-second mark. Sorry for the inconvenience.
scanner already, you can get things like Nessus or Qualys, Nexpose, things like that, that will at least give you so many hosts that you would be able to scan and take to your C-level executive and say, all right, this is all bad. We got this from a free tool. This tool you can also pay for later on down the road, but we can fix all of this right now. I was a huge Microsoft nerd for a while. I did a lot with your policy objects, and I'm really super picky and anal about everything being right. So I would like strip apart all of the group policy objects from, there's like 50 of them, print them all out on paper and, you know, do a diff manually between them all. That was a gigantic pain. I don't recommend doing that. Places like NIST, and there's other websites out there that have a already hardened best practice group policy object for servers, for Windows XP, for Windows 7, for 10, whatever. Like whatever OS that you have, they already have a GPO out there that you can download and just magically import, and boom, you don't have to worry about doing all your individual settings. They just have it all done for you, and they list out what all is configured. As few as possible domain admins. Almost every place that I've walked into that's a Windows shop have had the whole IT department's a domain admin. That's a very, very powerful account that you can screw up a lot with. We actually had a contractor be given domain admin access and turned one of our application servers into a domain controller, which, I mean, it didn't break anything, but that's not good to have somebody that's in India that you don't know their name have access to be able to do whatever they want to your entire domain. You want to take those accounts, have maybe one or two, and only use that when necessary. And instead of giving everybody domain admin access, like, hey, I have a new server, and to get my application to work, I have to install it as a domain admin. Crack down on that shit. Like, you want to know exactly what that application's doing, what its permission levels need to be, give it its own account. It's very time intensive, but in the long run, it's going to save you a lot of time, because if something happens where you have to change that domain admin's password, which you should often, but I've also been in places where they haven't changed it in 10 years, and it's, you know, a 4-character password that anybody could guess. Getting rid of open shares. You don't have to like try and remember this. I have not these updated slides yet, but after this, because I kind of just finished editing these, I'll put it up on the slideshare.net. So I'll give you all that information at the end. This script will actually scan your network and tell you all the open shares you have, which you shouldn't have any, unless you want to use that open share as kind of like a honeypot share that you always keep track of, which can be good for ransomware also. You keep a track of that open share. Anything that tries accessing it or writing to it, you'd want to alert on. But that should be the only open share that you have. I know there's legacy shit that comes into play, but for the most part, that should be it. Disabling Telnet. A lot of legacy devices still have Telnet enabled. Try and get that off your network. I know getting off old Cisco equipment, getting off old, you know, large IBM boxes or whatever, that's all they can do is Telnet. But trying to move past that isn't always free, but you can, if you can't get rid of Telnet, you can at least alert on it. Lockdown logins over HTTPS. A lot of people have open HTTP logins everywhere, so you should switch to HTTPS. That's one. I did, so that's for Frontier Communications. Probably one of the most embarrassing things that I've ever done was last year at DEF CON. I was a part of the SECTF, the Social Engineering Village. So what they do is they give, every year you have to like apply, And they give you a company. You have to do a whole bunch of OSINT on them. You have like a list of 30 questions that you have to answer, like, you know, what do they use for trash service, or what do they use for their VPN address, that kind of stuff. There's a whole big list. But when you get to the conference, they put you on this glass box that's all soundproofed up on stage, and you have to call the company and try and also get more points. I bombed. Like, it was the worst experience ever. Thank God they don't record it, because I was just a wreck afterwards. So I'll never do that again. I learned that day that I really don't like phishing over the phone. It was just not fun at all. Some people are really good at it, but not me. But that was my company, and I found they had a whole lot of stuff that you could log into over HTTPS. So this is their F5 device. Not storing plain text passwords. No, an Excel spreadsheet that's password protected doesn't count. Get a password management, whether it is something free that you can use, that you can just share back and forth, or if it's a something like LastPass that is a paid service but has a whole lot of bells and whistles. Start free if you want. You don't necessarily have to have the super expensive password manager that gives you all of those options right away, but don't store them in plain text, especially like even in scripts, that kind of stuff. No open Wi-Fi. I was also at a place that had open Wi-Fi. I worked at a help desk. Some old lady called, and she's like, my Wi-Fi's not working. And at that point, we were supposed to go like help the customers if their Wi-Fi wasn't working. Like, all right, well, what room are you in? It's like, oh, I'm on so-and-so street. All right. So she was just living down the street using our Wi-Fi, and she thought that she would call and let us know it wasn't working. That network had just so many problems with it, and that was one of the major ones. You can no-shut ports that are unused, so that way nobody can walk up, plug in their laptop to this port over here, and automatically get on your inside network. A lot of places don't do that, and nobody's going to ask. You're just going to go sit up with your laptop next to an outlet. They think like you're charging it or whatever, but no, you can just plug in a Cat5 cable and get on their network. Setting up port security will do the same thing, but if there was a terminal here already, so say, you know, it's some front secretary's desk or whatever, you can't unplug hers and plug right in, because it'll automatically no-shut that port then if it sees another MAC address. Disabling SSL. So many, 33% of all HTTPS servers are vulnerable to one of these attacks on the internet. That SSL Labs link will let you test your website to see if it's vulnerable, and the second link will actually show you how to switch from SSL to TLS. Setting up centralized logins. You don't want everybody to be sharing a login for all your core switches, because, you know, as soon as somebody gets pissed off and leaves, you don't want to have to just you don't have to worry about them. You can just disable their account. You don't have to switch all the passwords. Setting up BitLocker or any other kind of encryption software on end devices, especially if you work in somewhere that requires it. You don't want to have to come out to the media and say, we've lost a device with 50,000 HIPAA records on it. This will prevent you if you can prove that that drive was encrypted. Network device configuration backups is just kind of a no-brainer. Something dies, something gets compromised, you're going to be able to go back and see a diff between what was working and what's not, or what wasn't hacked into, or what was. Patching your Linux boxes, so many people forget about that. And regenerating SSH keys from default. This one is an easy step to do. It's not necessarily a huge vulnerability, because the attacker has to have the ability to access that traffic anyways to be able to exploit something like this. But regenerating those keys is definitely a good step. One thing that you can do on Shodan too is copy and paste like a public SSH key, and it will show you all the devices that have not regened that key. So a lot of ISPs do that. So they'll just ship out modems or whatever like crazy, and they'll all have the same SSH key in them. Removing unneeded software. 3 billion devices run Java, but 2,999,999 wish they hadn't. Java is a huge exploit. If you don't need it for any piece of software on your end devices, get rid of it. Block it somehow, whatever. Update it if you need it, if you actually do need it. Another thing, Adobe Acrobat, any like third-party apps that aren't really covered by automatic like Windows updates or whatever. There are software packages out there that will allow you to push out updates to that kind of stuff also. Block browsing from servers. A lot of when I worked in the SOC, we got a lot of alerts saying, you know, this server tried to access this threat listed website address, and they were trying to access it from a domain controller. Overall bad idea to access the internet from anything with critical information on it. Logging successful logins and alerting on, there's like correlation searches that you can do with successful and unsuccessful logins. So if you see several unsuccessful logins followed by a successful, or a large amount of unsuccessful followed by a successful, and then many successful, you know people are using that, possibly using that account for malicious activity. ILO settings. So if your servers have an ILO card, it's, what's the I stand for? Something lights out. Thank you, integrated lights out. I was thinking interface. Integrated lights out. So you can, all the ILOs come with default usernames and passwords that are out there. There's Metasploit modules that will scan your network and tell you, you know, how many Dell servers you have with the default password. But you could just log in with that default password and boom, you have access to the desktop. You have you have access to the physical properties of the server, but you would also have access, depending on if somebody logged in or logged out or not, to that entire server. So those settings are extremely important. And DNS servers and DCs should not have any other types of software on them. We had going back to that public Wi-Fi, we had our network to begin with, so this is all fixed. Took a while, but it's fixed now. Our network had our public-facing website was dual-homed, so it had access to the internet and access to the internal intranet from the same server. So you could go to the server from the internet, and the back-end SQL database that populated our website was on the domain controller. So you could go right from the internet through the website to the domain controller, which also served up Wi-Fi to that public Wi-Fi address, public Wi-Fi point. So you could kind of go full circle. You could come in through the website, go to the DC, and then go back out to the public Wi-Fi, or the other way around. Turning off DNS zone transfers gives a little bit less information to potential attackers. Turning off open recursive DNS prevents DNS spoofing. Open mail relays, you don't want anybody anywhere to be able to send out of your mail server. I see this a lot with Exchange servers that are on the internet. They just leave it all the default settings, and everybody's able to connect to this open mail relay and send out information wherever they want. There's websites, there's lists on websites out on the internet that will show you all the current open mail relays that are on the internet. You can send mail as anybody to anybody. So I think, yep, that's that picture. So can anybody tell me when the ransomware started changing file names and encrypting files? Around 3 o'clock, right? If you turn on advanced auditing on your files, you're going to be able to alert on this in a heartbeat. No, you're not going to no, you're not going to stop the ransomware for whatever device it's on unless you're super quick. But you're going to be able to prevent it from spreading and be able to look for indicators of compromise, that kind of stuff, to make it so that ransomware doesn't spread, doesn't get any worse. NetDisco is a free software that I absolutely love. You can install it. It will crawl your network. It will show you what iOS versions you have everywhere. It will tell you what's hanging off of what port. It'll give you a MAC address. It will give you, you know, what ports are open on your switches, what ports are disabled. It used to be kind of a pain in the ass to install, but I think they've gotten a little bit better with it the further they've gone along in versions. Great free software for being able to tell what's actually on your network. And don't forget your printers. Did anybody see when Youve spewed out a whole bunch of anti-Semitic printouts to all open printers on the internet? Yeah, don't forget to secure your printers. One of the major things I hear from like my offensive friends is that admin credentials are stored on printers everywhere. It's one of the easiest things to get. There's some free software that you can install on Windows and Linux boxes. So URL scan will scan incoming requests to your website and kind of figure out if it's a legitimate request or not, and will block the ones that don't seem to be. There's a whole bunch of settings that you can set with that. That's for IIS, for Microsoft. Ooh, excuse me. Let's see here. Oh, so some of the things are like max URL and remove when they try to remove the server header. Fail to ban will scan your log. This is for Linux. Fail to ban will scan your log files and automatically add anything that looks suspicious to your Linux firewall. Let's see. Your mod security is a WAF that will do like full logging for all your HTTP stuff on Linux. And it'll provide like a kind of a security assessment of the website, but like it's running on Apache or whatever. And it's pretty easy to install. It's just one command that, and I've never really had any problems with defaults on any of the ones that I've installed it on. Password management, again, no, you don't want to store it in plain text. And Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer should be run on all your Windows servers before you put it out there. No, I did this totally wrong. This is what happens when you edit slides right before you're talking. So an IR bug out bag, just a compilation of things that you should have when the shit hits the fan. When your network just gets hosed, or you know you have an attacker inside, you want to have this stuff available to you if you're not able to get off the internet anymore, or if they compromise your domain controller and just completely shut off authentication. This kind of stuff will save your ass in the long run. I don't know that you can really fit it in a bug out bag, but have a room with all this shit in it is probably good. And I added caffeine and snacks on there because I was worried because all the bullet points didn't line up. And I couldn't think of anything else to add here. So if you have anything else that might go well with an IR bug out bag, that's great. This Blue Team Handbook, Incident Response Edition, is where I kind of got the idea for the book that I'm writing, because I wanted something that was more encompassing than just incident response. But this is absolutely wonderful for incident response policies, procedures, steps to go through. The Incident Handler's Handbook from SANS actually has commands that you can run on Windows and Linux, and it has already built playbooks that you can use in your environment and just edit instead of starting from the ground up. Everybody know what purple teaming is? Come on, you guys aren't very interactive. Show of hands of who doesn't know what purple teaming is. Come on, come on. All right. So purple teaming is, so you have red team and blue team, right? Red team is offensive, blue team is defensive. Purple team is when you combine the two and have your defensive team, whether it be your security team or, you know, whoever is the technical people in your department, actually doing as much as they can to pen test from the inside. So you can go, you don't have to go a full year or however long you have to wait for a pen test to have somebody legitimately try and attack your network and find weaknesses. You have somebody that can consistently do it without having to pay for, you know, a large full-scale pen test. So some of the things that you can do, I think some of these are, oh no, it's not. I think I go over purple teaming later. All right, something else that you can do is user education. Something that's near and dear to my heart is also a full chapter in the book too. A lot of people look down on user education because they're just stupid users. What do they know? They are your first line of defense when it comes to, you know, letting you know a phishing attempt came in. They're more than likely them calling you and saying, something weird's happening. That's going to work better than any blinky box that you have on your network, because the phishing attempts are always going to get through. You're not going to be able to alert on them all. That person watching their inbox and knowing something looks weird and contacting you is priceless. But they also have to be able to talk to you, right? You can't just shove them to the side and say, oh yeah, right, you just don't know what you're doing, that's why it looks weird. You have to be open and willing to communicate with them, because they're going to add to your security posture in the long run. There's a script out there that will go and change all your local admin passwords if they're the same, and do like some kind of iteration, right? The one time, like a long time ago when I worked for ISP, we would set like the local admins to be customer 3-letter code that we use for them, like XYXY, and then customer number, or, you know, some number of the month. That way, not every local admin password is the same. You wouldn't be able to hop from one box to another with the same password if you were an attacker. And least privilege as a general concept over everything that you do. Application whitelisting instead of application blacklisting. It's way easier to know what software is supposed to run on your environment as opposed to what software isn't supposed to run on your environment. Because there's new malware coming out hourly that you wouldn't have to worry about if you just started to do application whitelisting instead. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass to do in the beginning, because especially depending on the size of your environment, it's going to be such a large amount of software. Like, since I worked in healthcare all the time, it's a lot of the experience I go back to. We're like a 400-ish bed hospital, and we probably had 300 different applications over different vendors, different departments, that kind of stuff. So it's really difficult to be able to start there in an environment that hasn't had it before. But it's definitely worth it in the long run. And then canary in the coal mine. Kind of the same idea as that open share that you always monitor. You can do the same thing with like a SQL server. Set a SQL server up. Don't leave everything default when everything else is locked down as hell, because any smart attacker, smart pen tester is going to realize that's the canary in the coal mine and just ignore that box. Just lock it down a little bit. Leave maybe one vulnerability open, something like that, and that's the server that service accounts that you're going to monitor for. And egress filtering. So everything outbound on your network should be filtered as well. Most people just filter inbound traffic. So if you filter inbound traffic but not outbound, you're going to have somebody that takes their laptop home, gets it infected, and just completely hoses your network from the inside, because now they're doing command and control stuff where they go off the internet, and it just just a huge cycle. Blocking like a default deny, and then going through and seeing what actually you need to have open. Also something really difficult to do when you already have everything open in your firewall, but something that needs to be done. So this is a little bit more about purple teaming. You don't have to be amazing. Like, I suck at offense. Like, all the jobs that when I was searching for jobs, all the ones that I could find were offense. And I'm not confident enough in my skills. I know how to do this stuff. So this stuff is great when you want a purple team and you don't have to give a report to the customer at the end of the day saying, yeah, I've tried everything. You just can try the simple stuff in your network to get you by until your next penetration test. These are some of the things that will give an attacker or pen tester domain admin right away. So NetBIOS and link local multi-name resolution, I think. You can spoof really easy with Responder. You'll just say, hey, I'm this device, and it will listen for those NetBIOS queries and answer them, because that's what Windows starts out with before DNS. Instead of looking for something, it will look for it through NetBIOS. You can turn that off relatively easily and through policy. Nmap and mass scan your network. Make sure you don't screw it up. Like I did a mass scan on the one place that I worked and completely took down their firewall. So there are some firewalls that do not like being port scanned, which you would think firewalls would be okay with. This one was not. So do it during a downtime. Communicate so you don't get fired. Metasploit, something else that is really cool to play with, especially if you can do it like in a lab first, kind of learn some of the tools that Metasploit has baked in. There's a lot of custom stuff that you can do with it too, but there's a really good book out there by Dave Kennedy that goes over some really amazing Metasploit stuff. RAR is a really cool Python script that will search your network for web pages and will just display a splash of web pages for you that it found on your network. This is used a lot from attackers, pen testers, whatever, internally to see what looks like it might be the best source of information or the biggest target. And you might find websites out there that you didn't know, like a default website or something on a server that's not listed as a web server that you didn't know that you had. And SET is a social engineering toolkit. It's part of, you can download it independently or it's a part of Kali. It's what I did all my internal phishing campaigns with. You can create pretty simply, like with options 1, 2, and 3. Like you'll list a subject, you'll list names of targets, and you can automatically just send out an email to them with a link, and they will be redirected back to the box you're running it from. And you can capture credentials, you can try and get reverse shells. Credential capturing is like one of the easiest things ever. And if you really need to get anybody's attention on why user security is important, run this in front of them after a phishing attempt. Especially if you don't have any user education yet. The first time I ran it, I got out of 300, I got something like 150 usernames and passwords back. The email was from a Gmail address. There was no attachment. It was just a plain 2-line non-HTML site that took you to an IP address. And they're like, oh, it's a survey. They gave me their domain admin username and password, or their domain username and password. And these two links are good. So the first one is the top 10 ways that top 5 ways that Spider Lab got domain admin, includes that NetBIOS stuff and how to fix it, and some other things too. And Pentest top 5 are kind of the same thing, just different category. How many do I have left? All right. Working on secure compliance. I don't know. So Joshua Marpet is actually running a really cool class here today or tomorrow, I think, on the difference between security and compliance and why they're not mutually exclusive. There's a way to do compliance correctly, and there's a way to do compliance. You can be one of those organizations, and this happens a lot even in the security community, where like, all right, yep, I got this, but they don't do a deep dive in to figure out if they're doing it correctly. Sure, you have two-factor authentication, but it's not really implemented correctly, so anybody's going to get past it anyways. And there's ways that you can implement two-factor authentication that don't work right. And that goes for really all of the different compliance areas. Bless you. So for the love of God, have a DMZ. You can put it behind a firewall. The network segmentation can be very difficult to put in place, especially if you don't have a budget for firewalls. But it's definitely something necessary for the design of your environment, because you don't want everything to be able to be accessed from the internet. All the time I see people like RDPs open to the internet and they find it on their pen test, or just randomly they find RDP open to the internet, or they find, you know, a number of things that if it's going to be accessed from the internet, it should be in a DMZ. And don't put everything in your DMZ. Creating more VLANs, so not having a flat network makes it more difficult for attackers to pivot. You go from one machine to the next, so having all your high priority servers on one VLAN, having, you know, maybe different departments even, so you can have HR on a VLAN, you can have, you know, in our case it was like all the doctor's offices on a different one. It separates your local area network into, you know, you can put access controls in between the two, so it's not as easy to just scan an entire /8 of your inside network and you have everything. That makes it a little bit more difficult for you, but way more difficult for them. Active Directory delegation of rights gets past the whole everybody has domain admin, especially for your IT team, you know, database admins, that kind of stuff might need a little bit more elevated privileges. Access control lists between VLANs. And this is finally, if you have done all that, that's the majority of what everything that we just covered is completely free. All it's going to take is your time and a lot of grumpy people. Like I mean, if all of that's wrong with your network and they don't realize how messed up it is, you're going to make their lives harder by making them have more difficult passwords, or making it so their machines automatically lock. The end users are going to notice when you become more secure. It's going to be more difficult for them, but being able to go with your C-level executives so they know and you can communicate to everybody of why you're doing it would make it a little bit better. So now we're going to go for all the expensive stuff. So do you have a budget, which you should. If not, leave and go somewhere else. Get a real vulnerability scanner. Get a SIM, IDS, IPS to do some of that advanced correlation searches, alerting, threat list stuff that is out there that, you know, you have to pay for subscriptions for. That kind of stuff is going to be a budget line item. And I have to say Splunk, because Splunk is like the best, you know, SIM out there. Get a professional pen test, at least yearly. I know some people do it more often depending on the type of business you're in. Yearly is great. It gives you enough time to try and fix everything that they've found and do a little bit more on your own, so it makes it more difficult for them to get in next time. Don't always use the same pen tester. And know what the difference between a vulnerability scan and a pen test is. A lot of places will sell a vulnerability scan as a pen test. So if they just hand you a Nessus report, you're not getting any use out of that. They need to be actively trying to attack you using something other than, oh, hey, there's a vulnerability that's showing up in this tool. It's going to be so worth the price to actually have a legitimate one. setting up two-factor auth and doing it correctly. There's a way that there's at least one company I know of that you can set it up where you have no PIN, you have no key fob. What it does is it just calls a number that's in the software. So you put in your username and password, it calls the number, and all they have to do is hit pound. We've had people get past that so quickly because the user just has seen the number before, they know what to do, they're already trained, and they're going to hit that pound and let the attacker in. Because sure, maybe something in the background's logging in. And advanced buzzword devices. I'm going to go through these really quick because I'm almost out of time. Getting organized, IP address management. If you use static addresses, there's no way everything's going to be in DNS. So being able to track those somehow with IP address management. Password safes, which we talked about. Doing tabletops, actually incident response drills. So say, you know, this server gets attacked in this way, now what? Walk through it all. They're priceless. I've done those a couple times from my end with larger companies. Actually had one like last month. We went through a tabletop and they got almost the exact attack happened like 2 weeks later. They completely screwed it up, but they were way better off than they were if they had not done the tabletop. Same thing. This is a really good presentation about attack-driven defense. It talks about user education and why they're, you know, your first line of defense. 10 questions. 30 seconds left. My experience using Splunk as a SIM. The most of the work that I do is surrounding ES, which is Enterprise Security, which is the SIM product for Splunk. I think it's worked great. The amount of custom correlation searches that you can write, some of the ones that come out of the box from Splunk aren't the best, need a lot of tuning, but the power that you have with the logs coming in and the way they come in, you can create, you can alert on damn near anything, like correlation searches on that. And we have a lot of Hurricane Labs, I don't write them, but Hurricane Labs actually writes a lot of applications for Splunk that will pull a lot of that different data in. Anybody else? All right, thank you guys.